Hello and welcome. This is Kelly T. Woods. I'm here in Anacortes, Washington, and I'm so delighted to have this experience with a wonderful hypnotic man, and his name is Dale Turnbull. Dale is joining me here today from Montreal, and the reason that I reached out to him and asked for this interview conversation is because he's well known for the use of metaphor in his work. He is a metaphors of movement trainer, and he comes from a background of NLP and hypnosis and provocative change work. So I know that he's been doing this kind of work for more than a dozen years, and he has so much to share with us today. And I'm going to have lots of questions for you, Dale. And thank you very much for joining us here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be on.
Yes. So, where do we start? The topic of this is all about using metaphors in our work, and I'm a hypnotherapist who I do some training also, but my passion is working with one-on-one clients, and I also specialize in pediatric hypnosis. So using metaphors comes naturally to me after over 20 years in the industry. But if someone is new or someone really isn't familiar with the use of metaphors, how would you introduce this whole topic?
Good question. So the first thing is, well, what do we define as a metaphor? Because it can be a very obtuse construct. I mean, I remember when I first got into the whole world of personal development. I mean, I come from a corporate background originally, and I was looking to really enhance my impact with the people I was coaching and training. I was working within a recruitment sphere, and I came from the frame that I want to be able to adapt how I speak, how I present, how I talk, because I was like, well, if they're not listening, if they're not doing what I want them to do, similar to like clients, if the client is not changing, if the client is not getting the shifts, how do I need to adapt my approach? So I signed up to learn NLP. I learned from John Grinder, Richard Bandler, two of the co-creators. And I just remember when I first got into the training, I was sitting there, I was all excited, I'm going to learn to influence people. And I go, ooh. And then for me, I just remember John Grinder walking in, and he just mentioned that on his way to this beautiful event, he saw a beautiful falcon spiraling up in the sky. And for a moment, he's like, what would it be like to be that falcon? To have a whole different perspective and be able to narrow down and really pinpoint what it was going to take away. Obviously, it was looking for food, it was looking for information, it was looking to really take in all the information so it can really leave with something that was nourishing for itself. And for me, I was like, wow, I'm sitting there in like the whole room, like still quiet. I mean, he did a much better job than me, slightly more practiced. But for me, I was like, wow, that's metaphor. But when I first started to try and speak and talk metaphor, create stories, it's hard work. It's hard work to just come off with stories off the top of your head. So I've always been a little bit intrigued, and I sort of stumbled in on my journey of getting better, impacting people, moving more into the therapeutic side as well as I still do business stuff. I found metaphors of movement, and for me, it was a really mind blowing way of working with clients because it's not about you making up a story, you creating a story, or you even getting your clients to tell the story. You're eliciting what's known as their autogenic metaphor. What's that like? That whole underlying surface structure from the client. And we're working with that. So it gets with the whole storytelling thing, it puts that to one side. And it really actually, okay, what is the client experiencing under the surface? And yeah, it really transformed how I see the world. And yeah, I'm just really passionate about it because for me, it also helped me to understand myself better because normally when I'm asked, how do you feel, Dale? I'm pretty clueless about the whole thing. So yeah, so it's really powerful work, and yeah, I'm excited to share it today.
I love it. I love how you arrived in this fascination with the use of metaphor. And I'm not a linguistic expert. I think I came into it more organically just through my love of reading and writing. And then, of course, when I started working in hypnotherapy, it became evident that this was an aspect of how we communicate that really came from the subconscious mind. It's been said, metaphor has been said to be the language of the subconscious. And so that excited me. How could I speak even more directly but subtly to that part of my client's mind? So where do metaphors come from?
So, I mean, metaphors, I think, normally come from the non-dominant hemisphere. Essentially, if we look at the two generalizations, The Master and His Emissary, really interesting book, ridiculously hard read. Audiobook's a struggle as well. But it sort of talks about the generalization that there are two different halves of the human brain. One is the more logical, the more pragmatic, the more conscious, which I'm sure we're all aware of. And then you've got the unconscious, the more obtuse side of the brain. And what metaphors of movement does is it looks, okay, unconscious information. And how can we translate that unconscious information to conscious awareness? I mentioned earlier that I've always struggled with emotions. I'm more of what I'd say, I somatically describe stuff. So I learned, like, I think 3 years ago, what being anxious is, because my wife's like, "Oh, how are you feeling?" I'm like, "I don't know. Like, I feel this, that, that." She's like, "Oh, that's anxiety." I'm like, "Oh, is it? That's nice to know," because men don't talk about this kind of stuff stereotypically. I mean, if you've got a significant other and you're listening, or and you've asked, "Well, how do you feel? How's it going?" You know there's something going on. If they're aware enough, they know there's something going on, but they just sort of lack the vocabulary to express that. And I had that. I remember when I did my first NLP class, as I said, I was excited to learn the stuff, impact the people. And I was in this class and I'm like, everybody's a mess. Why does everyone have all these problems? They're like, what do you want to work on? I'm like, what do you mean? Perfectly fine. I was in the, I was it, unconsciously incompetent. I wasn't aware of all my challenges, issues, problems, stuff like that. So, and it's not because, I mean, one, I was just unaware of frameworks that help to give insight, but I had no way of communicating these things. When I've done some of the metaphors work with women, when I've done demonstrations and things, they're like, "So, Dal, are you telling me that my husband doesn't actually know that there's something going on with him?" It's like, yeah, he just doesn't have a way to articulate the problems and challenges that he faces. And sometimes clients have that same problem too. They can't express what's going on under the surface because, in my mind, it's so unconscious to them. They know that, like, I was working with a guy, actually really interesting. He had a psychosomatic problem. And I'm like, "So what's the problem?" He's like, "I've got this problem in my jaw. Can you help?" It was a Hypno Thoughts Live for those who go to conferences. It was a Hypno Thoughts Live. I was doing some demos at my little vendor booth. And he's like, "I mean, I've got this thing. It's like, I've been to the spiritual room, I've been to the healing room, but it's just not fixed it." I'm like, "Well, I don't know if this is going to work, but let's give it a whirl." So he had a seat. And I'm like, "What's that whole thing like?" And he's like, "Well, Dad, it's like there's this guy holding my mouth." And I'm like, "Well, so let me draw a picture." So I drew it. So where's this guy relative to you? And he's like, "Well, I'm sitting down on a chair." I'm like, okay. So he's sitting down on a chair, and there's a guy to his left. And this guy to his left is sort of holding his mouth shut. So for those of you who are looking, like, sitting on a chair, guy holding his mouth shut. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, "Well, what are you doing? You're just sitting there. He's keeping your trap shut. You're not able to express yourself. But ultimately, you're not taking a stand for anything as well." He's like, "Oh, shit. Yeah, I'm not." And I'm like, "Well, let's just try something." And I'm like, "Well, why don't you just take a stand?" And he's like, "Literally." And he stood up and he looked at me. And I looked at him and he looked at me. And he's like, "It's gone." I'm like, "That's a bit strange." And what came to him through this process is, a couple of weeks ago, he'd had a business interaction with a colleague of his, and he didn't express himself. He didn't voice his opinion. He didn't actually express what was going on. And that was actually, and once he realized that, once we were able to bridge that gap between what he was experiencing unconsciously and then bringing it to his not only conscious understanding through the way we communicated it, but we were able to shift it up, he got the sort of shift he was looking for. So for me, this work's got so many applications. When you take someone on a hypnotic journey, the information that comes out of their mouth is unconscious information because they weren't aware of it at the time. So, what would it be like if, oh no, I'm in a stream, I'm in a medieval city? What would it be like if wherever they come up, if you could communicate to conscious awareness the underlying meanings of those things without imposing content, without saying, well, that means, because I don't like imposing meaning. It makes me feel awkward when people do it to me. So for me, it's just so freeing. And for me personally, it's truly helped me to understand me more. Let's say I have a bit of a Barney. Barney is an argument for those who don't know what a Barney. Barney, rubble, trouble, Cockney rhyme is like, if I'm having a Barney with my wife, which is like, what's wrong? I need to draw a metaphor. I can't articulate my issue. So this modality just helps so much. And also, it's active. I've never been one for sitting meditation. It's got great value, but just, yeah, not my, maybe I need to draw a metaphor on that. But yeah, for me, it's just, it helps to empower your own self-awareness from a very, very different lens.
Well, that makes sense what you're talking about. And I I've been thinking about how metaphors sometimes can be ambiguous, and people struggle with that. People don't like uncertainty. The human brain, especially the conscious mind, doesn't like that ambiguity. And so metaphors help us map meaning and make meaning too. So it's almost like a bridge. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I love the metaphor. So if I was to draw, so if I was to look at Kelley, and I'm like, Kelley, if we were to explore your metaphor for metaphors, you would see it as a bridge, which is a way of getting from A to B. It helps people get over things. Ultimately, it's like there's a barrier, there's an impasse. If there's water, be an emotional impasse if you're into your esoteric stuff. But ultimately, it helps someone to get from A to B. They overcome something through the telling of the story. And what I found so fascinating is all of these different words that we say in everyday life, we speak in metaphors all the time. And these subtle ways we communicate teaches us so much about a client. Um, but without conscious awareness, I mean, you might look, I mean, the way I look at pre-session questionnaires, I used to hate them because I'm more about winging it. But what I love about a pre-session questionnaire is it gives me clues to the underlying structure. For those who've done NLP, you've got meta programs in there. You've got potentially limiting beliefs if that's the filter. But the metaphors will inform what's actually going on with the client and what's their issue. And one of the key examples I love to use is like I'm at a crossroads. Okay, we've all heard that. It's like I'm at crossroads in life. So if I was to draw that out, you've got a path in front, a path to the right, and a path to the left. That's what it's like inside their head. So their issue isn't that they're at a crossroads. Their issue is they need to make a decision. But the trouble is they can progress to the path they look forward to, but that means they won't be doing the right path, or they won't be doing the path that's left for them to explore. Or they could do the path that's right for them, but that means they can no longer do the path they're looking forward to. So in their mind, they've got to make a decision, and that's the actual problem. It's not that they're an impasse. It's just that, well, the question would be, well, what's at the end of each path? Could be a more interesting question because I understand the metaphorical structure going on under the surface.
Right. So it's a mapping. And
100%.
and also, your example of the crossroads, I often think of that in expanded ways of through time and space. So even when we're doing timeline work, right? Or one of my favorite approaches is taking people to the multiverse, to alternate parallel universes. And so metaphorically, this allows them to try on different incarnations of their lives, even from the past or the future. So all of this is metaphorical in nature. When you talked about an intake process where you're
Yeah.
getting some of this fodder, and you know the are our intake, that pre-talk, all of that before we do any kind of formal thing with our client, it is so powerful. It's such an opportunity for not only learning these things, but for creating change within that period of time. So you have obviously attuned your attention to listen for, you picked up on my bridge metaphor immediately. And I've seen and heard you do that in other instances also, even in our correspondence. How did you develop that? Did you consciously decide that you're going to use the spotlight of your attention to be able to procure those tidbits?
Okay. So when I actually learned the metaphors of movement work, the levels 1 and 2, it gives you essentially a start to understand metaphor. But one of the problems with a lot of personal development is people want a result straight away. Like they want a process they can use there and then. I remember when I first studied NLP, we learned about the meta program. Meta programs, we learned about the Milton model and the meta model. The Milton model is just for ease, hypnotic language. And the Milton model, what's the other one? I've just mixed it up. Anyway, the other one, the flip side, it looks at chunking down to get more specific. One is more abstract and one is more specific, and they both have two useful intentions. But in order to speak in a Milton style model, to be more abstract, which is a lot good for hypnosis and confusion, that takes practice, that takes structure. And to identify when people are speaking in those generalizations, it also takes practice and structure. So for me, I'm starting to hear these different things. So, for example, you talked about the pre-session questionnaire. When you have fodder, now fodder, you normally have cannon fodder, which is ammunition, which could imply that Kelley looks like, okay, we're going into a bit of a conflict when we're working with clients, depending on the type of client. So I can start to extrapolate all these things. Now, I never say that that is going to be the case. But what I'm looking for is these are almost like the data, the markers, the clues for how it could look. And then I'm obviously feeding back and testing that with the client. Because, for example, clients who don't, like, if you give me a pre-session questionnaire, I won't write much. Normally because I freaking hate it. But I normally won't write much because I'm quite abstract thinking. I'm quite big picture. So I don't tell the details. When I come back from the office that I go to do my work because I don't like working at home. Anyway, that's a whole different story. But when I come back, I'm like, so darling, how was your day? Well, when you left, my wife tells me from step 8, and she goes through all the steps. The level of detail, the level of information is quite intense. So even that, when you're looking at a client's questionnaire, do they go into tons of detail? So they're more little chunk thinking. So maybe they need to think more of the bigger picture, or are they really bigger picture? And if they're really bigger picture, they might not look at the details, the problems, the issues. So all of these different things sort of come together. So to start thinking this way in metaphor, it takes practice, it takes awareness. But when you just hear an odd metaphorical expression, I'm hitting my head against a brick wall, that tells you so much about a client's way they're thinking. But we just disregard it because, oh, that's just a thing that people say. But metaphors, and specifically autogenic metaphors, the metaphors of Moon work in what's known as systems thinking. So there's a great book called The Art of Systems Thinking, which talks about how there are so many intricate systems within us as humans, but also it applies to business, that you may disrupt one thing, but that won't necessarily disrupt the whole system. Things like PCW or provocative change work at not looking at this is the outcome we're getting someone to, but we're going to disrupt the system so much so the system is no longer the system. It's like an elastic band. If you stretch it so much in so many directions, it's no longer the same thing. It's something different. Then you can work with that difference.
Something that you were talking about when you're getting this information, these clues from a client. Will metaphor also describe, even in more detail, the relationship that they have with whatever they're struggling with? Will it give them their perspective or their position to it, how close they feel to it, or if they're dissociated from it?
100%. So Okay, we can do a little mini exercise and we can do this about someone we like as opposed to someone who's problematic. Right? So, if you think about somebody in your life, it could be anybody that you have a positive relationship to. Okay. And if you were to just close your eyes for a moment and imagine, okay, where are they in space? Are they in front? Are they to the left? Are they to the right? Are they behind? Where are they relative to you? And you might get a sense of that. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Coach B is also put right in front of her face. They're really close. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
You've been mentioned. Okay, so we've also, so with that, we've got elements of distance. So that expresses how connected or disconnected you are, how possible it is for that person to handle you, be intimate with you, be not intimate with you. So distance in that instance, so this can be done just in space in general, or it could come up in metaphor. Now, you've heard the expression like, the woman is always right. The woman is always right. That would imply that she's to the right. Now, let's say I don't have that belief structure. In my relationship with my wife, I put my wife first. So if you were to imagine, I'm here, my wife's there, she's looking away from me, okay, but I put her first. So she's looking the way, she's leading the way, she's taking steps forward, which means I don't put myself first. I'm in the second position, I'm in the background. I can give her a bit of a push, a bit of a guide. Now, that is how we normally live. And it's great because she puts herself first. I also put her first. If we were to both try and put each other first, it would be a bit weird because the dynamic wouldn't necessarily work. However, it also has problems. You never decide where we're going for dinner. You never organize anything because she's always the one taking the lead. Right? Now, a little while ago, my wife sort of changed what she was doing business wise. And she tried to lead the way in my metaphors of movement business. That didn't work. Okay. So when it comes to that context, I'm in front, she's behind. Okay. But in most contexts, that's how it works. Now, each of these positions we can take have positives, have negatives, have pros and cons. And it's about how we do these things. What's the distance, the ability to connect? So we can consider, but we don't just have to do that. We can think about what's our relationship to money. Is money right for us? Have we left money to one side? Is money on top of us? Is money weighing us down? Is it a bit of a burden? Is it something we stand on? Is it something we supports us? Now, let's just imagine you're standing on a big pile of cash. This could be people who have potentially inherited a lot of money or come from wealth. If they're to take steps, if they're to go somewhere in their life, they're moving away from the money. So let's just imagine I'm somebody in that sort of environment. I've got a certain amount of wealth, but I want to do something with my life. That might distance myself from my family, from my money, which is going to cause problems and issues. So we can explore all of these different things.
Okay.
Through this
So,
kind of lens.
are these universal? You're drawing a universal meaning on a metaphor like that? I think about dream metaphors and symbolism and how there are books that tell you what each dream means. And sometimes that's problematic for me because we are so different, especially, people's experiences are going to have them put a different meaning to it or their culture, right?
I fully agree. So this is where metaphors of movement differs. So you can do dream analysis with metaphors of movement, but I want to give you an example. So the example I was using with my wife, I put my wife first. She's ahead of me. She's at the forefront. She's choosing the direction. There's no argument there. You just sort of get it, you understand it, and you agree with it. Okay. But it could also be said that she puts herself first. She doesn't put me first. So I could be positive about it, or I could be slightly more negative. Either way, both are true.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I would say, what does love mean? Everyone can have a different interpretation of what love means for them. But the way I'm speaking when I'm talking about metaphor, I'm speaking within what's known as idiomatic communication. And an idiom is a culturally understood. So, for example, US and UK, they're slightly different, right? So it depends where you're located and your culture or your cultural understanding. It's expressions that are understood. The meaning is globally understood by that culture. So we don't need to talk about it.
Mhm.
It's just known. For example, if someone, it's like he ripped my heart out. Like he ripped my heart out. Okay, so it could be said that he's holding your hearts in the palm of his hand. He's handling you emotionally. But it also feels like he took a part of you. He stole a part of you. When I communicate that way, there's no like a jarringness of meaning. It's just that is understood and it makes sense. And this is where I think, regardless of the metaphors of movement work specifically, that's got its own pluses. I think that the real power that I've gained from it is it allows me to communicate using this sort of frame of language that allows to translate unconscious communication to conscious awareness. So, for example, I studied as a shamanic practitioner, got my little drum, got my little shaker, so I can do some shamanic work. Don't do it normally mainstream. However, I wanted to try this. So I had someone very good practitioner. They do a lot of work, and they did a sample with somebody, and then after the session, I got the practitioner to talk about their experience. I got the participant to talk about their experience, and I re-communicated their experience. I remember I did a journey with a guy, and this guy was like, he was in like a swamp, and we did some work, and we got him out of the swamp. That was my frame. So that's my projection into his experience. Whether you believe it spiritually, whatever, I'm not here to talk about that. I'm just talking about the communication of it, right?
Understood.
But then when we've got the participant, she reported back, wow, I just feel like you fully understood me and you fully really got my experience. And for me, that's what it's about. It's about, I often got frustrated in my hypnotherapy trainings and stuff like that because I didn't understand what the hell was going on. I got that it was profound. I got that change happened. I got that it was beneficial to my life. And normally that used to be enough because I'm like, stereotypical man want to fix stuff. So from that point, I had no issue. But what really lacked was my own understanding and awareness of things. And this is what I feel that helps to encapsulate. So for those of you who look at my YouTube channel, there's a thing called Social Panorama, which is Lucas Dirks's work. It also works within mental space, but it focuses on relationships. And he does a lot more NLP interventions. But one of my videos on my website is I do the intervention because I'm practicing, I'm learning, like always about learning new stuff, right? So I do the intervention with this participant, but then after it, she's like, wow, that was profound, that was great. But then after, I use the metaphors of movement language to communicate the whole process. And she's like, wow, now I really get what's gone on, what's happened, and what's changed. And because I'm very good at being clueless, this is why I find it so powerful because it allows me to heighten my own awareness uh, and move forward.
Well, I love how your cluelessness has inspired you
Yeah, I've got,
to
I've
come
got
up with that kind of solution. We find motivation in all kinds of ways. So from what I understand, just a basic use of metaphor and how it creates change for a person is that, again, it's that language of the subconscious. And uh, there was a process that I learned years ago, that was designed for children, and of course I use it for adults too because we're all kids anyway. And it is using the metaphor of a dragon to represent the ego state that's causing whatever problem, whatever issue that a client is dealing with. And you have the client really describe that dragon and visualize it and notice how it feels and how they feel about it, etc. And then they start to bit by bit change the dragon. And we can also do some parts exploration with it, but it's not even necessary. Just by manipulating that representation, they start to feel different about how that part functions. And this is kind of hard for people to grasp, that there's no actual conscious intervention happening, that this is all happening on a very deep level, just changing the way that they see and feel about it changes things. So is this,
100%.
and is this um, a function of metaphor that this is happening when we're just delving into it? And how can we better facilitate that?
So I think there's a few different options. So the first thing, I mean, I really like that idea. And this is where I would add the level to the language. So, for example, if it's a big dragon, okay, so this is a pretty big thing. If it's a scary dragon, it's quite a big thing and quite a scary thing for you.
Yeah.
If it's a big dragon, it might eat you alive, you know? So I would be quite afraid of this if this was me. So I can start to communicate what that could mean, but without saying this means that. Yeah? I'm just communicating with this
Right.
language. So I think the way to think about it is we can metaphorically structure things. Now, in the metaphors of moonwork, we don't actually play with the person's metaphor. We don't actually manipulate the metaphorical structures, and there are places to do that, like the example that you showed. We or the work I do normally gets the person to move through their life and move through their experience. So they're doing the active work. Because it's like in NLP, you can get a picture. Where is that picture? Like the swish pattern. You can move where we store these things in space, and it creates different internal change. So I think, first of all, if it works, it works. Just play about, see what works, be creative with it. And I think, yeah, the idea, because metaphor is stored within the unconscious, by playing and manipulating and tweaking those things, we can create deep, but also a lot of different kinesthetic change. One of the other challenges, though, that I find with a lot of change work is a large majority of it is focused on getting people to feel better. Now, in my situation, I'm not necessarily, it's not about not me caring about them feeling better, but I'm not attached to them feeling better. I'll give you an example. So I was working with a woman, she fucking hated me. Can I swear on this? Oopsie. She didn't
Welcome
like me
to.
very much. She didn't like me very much. Anyway, so I was like, what's that whole thing like? She's like, I just don't know where I'm going. I just feel a bit stuck. And I'm like, what's that whole thing like? And she's like, well, I just feel like I've hit my peak. And I'm like, I get that, but what's it like? And she's like, well, it's like I'm on top of a mountain. Okay. So you're on top of the mountain. You've hit your peak. You've reached your peak. You're on top of the world. The whole world is below her. Everything and everyone is below her. Right? Now, I don't know if you've ever had the experience where you want to achieve something, and as soon as you achieve it, you get a bit disappointed afterwards. Right? You're like, yes. Yeah.
It's the anticlimax.
Exactly. Because what happened is you've reached your peak, but then it's, well, where are you going next? And any step is going to be a letdown. Because archetypally, especially in a lot of Western societies, up is good, getting promoted, going up in the world where big G man lives, or getting demoted, going down in the world, right? Normally bad. So anything I did with her, any step she took within this will be a letdown. But also, she's not aware of where the rest of her environment. She doesn't know where she wants to go next.
Right.
So I can look at this and ultimately, because sometimes, right, well, the example of the client who wants to leave their partner, male or female, let's disregard that. But let's say they want to leave their partner. But let's say they are financially reliant on their partner. If they leave their partner, their life's going to be hard. And it's going to be hard for a fair while. So we could, as a coach or therapist, make them feel better about that decision, but that might not actually be useful because it's going to suck. I mean, longer term, you could be the happiest person alive, but you might have a tough couple of years ahead. So these are the different things. And I think that's what we can sometimes miss a lot within coaching and therapy. What are the implications? I was working with a gentleman who had anger issues. I started and focused a lot of my initial work on anger. And he came to me and he's like, yeah, I already had coaching and therapy. But yeah, it really impacted me. I mean, I wasn't angry anymore, but his business went to pot. His business sort of decreased because his anger drove his business. So the therapy, because anger, as much as it seems negative, has got a lot of power, a lot of the whole "screw you" mentality. Like I can do it better. That anger's got a lot of energy towards it. So it's about, okay, this is when ecology becomes really important and understanding how these changes or these shifts could impact other aspects of people's lives. So it's okay. Well, what's the broader picture? Sometimes it's the environment that we're in, and for me, it's so empowering as a coach to be able to have that educational conversation with the client, to be able to talk through these things. And I haven't done like a huge history or whatever, but looking at a metaphor, me not knowing their context sometimes. Context is useful. It's good to understand these things, but this work can work content free because I can then talk about these things in an educational thing. So the client is more informed about their choices and decisions.
Makes perfect sense. And I'm aligned with you on that idea of uh, not having to be comfortable. And of course, that's Western, our Western take of positivity and wanting to have relief and also, that instant gratification. An example I had was a fellow who came to me. I live on an island here in Northwest Washington, and he came from another island for a smoking cessation session. And it went relatively well. And he gave me feedback the next day and said that he was very uncomfortable. And I said, good. Change can be uncomfortable. And the reason he wanted to quit smoking was because he had to get some surgery because his body was uncomfortable. And so the irony was lost until I brought it up to him. But I think that giving him permission to be uncomfortable with the change was very important. And he hadn't relayed that to me during that session, unfortunately. So I had some cleanup work to do. But understanding that we have to help clients be okay with that and with the uncertainty of change also, because otherwise they're just going to stay in their same safe place in that little protective bubble. And I think that this is where provocative uh, atmosphere comes into play. But you have to do it with finesse, right?
This is true. And so provocative change works, which I've studied for the last 3 years, is a provocative and conversational way of talking to people. It's not like just being rude or whatever. The sort of frame is like it's like you're someone's best friend. I remember using a provocative approach. This might be a bit shocking, but I had a sales call with a guy, and he's just like, and I just got off a provocative thing, so let's give it a whirl. And he's like, Dale, I just want to kill people. I'm like, well, how are we going to do it? Because I mean, we could use gasoline, but gas prices are getting astronomical nowadays. I mean, how many people are we talking? We talking like 100, 200? Because I mean, you got savings? Because this is, and it was really interesting, and it sounds really freaking weird to talk about it like that. But by having that conversation, I didn't get him as a client, but he did email me 2 months later when I sent a marketing email, and he's like, "Our conversation changed everything." And I'm like, "Too efficient, problem. Don't
There
fix
it
it in the
was.
sales
You,
call."
you gave him permission. Coach B has a question.
Yes, actually, I was working with a couple. So when the lady was describing the situation, she said, I feel like I'm on the edge. So one more step and I'll be done. When I was talking to the guy, he said, I keep asking her, we have to move forward, we have to move forward. So if she moves forward, she'll be dead. So how would I use this to work on the situation? Obviously, they don't see things the same way.
Okay, I got that right. So let's use that as an example. And I'm going to assume where they are relative to each other. So she feels like she's on the edge, and you could draw this with the client. Like if you
Yeah.
sort of hear that, and well, let's draw this, right? So she's on the edge, and this is her perspective, and he's trying. Let's imagine this way is forward. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
that's like forward. He's trying to push her, right? Push her to go over the edge. Now it could be a leap of faith, but it could be a massive letdown for her.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what she's standing on is currently supporting her. So if she's to progress, if she's to move forward, it's like, come on, we just need to take that step. We just need to take that leap. This doesn't mean it's true. This is just her perspective.
Yeah.
But for her, she has no support or understanding of what to do next. So if I was doing this with a couple, I'm like, so I'd probably draw it separately for each, but that's what it's like. But then you can talk about, okay, so it sounds like you're lacking support or you feel like you might go over the edge. Well, let's talk. You could then use that as a communication point. And like for him, he could see like there's a bridge and there's a way forward, but she doesn't. So you can have that sort of back and forth conversation because metaphorically they might be structuring it different. Or it's like, there's a new coaching program that's going to make us millions of money that we've seen marketing to us and we're super excited. Come on, let's just jump in. For him, he might like diving in. His strategy for life might be just to dive in, and hers, she wants solid support and foundations. So there's a bit of a mismatch, but then we can start to talk about these things. And what happens if we found a different way around this, a different way down? Could we look at this in a different way? We can open up that communication because we can get each other to understand what's going on under the surface. So that would be my invitation.
Thank you for answering that. And you reminded me of a recent 11-year-old that I worked with. His father had contacted me to help with some picky eating issues. The kid has some anxiety over trying new foods. And dad was there, which often with younger kids, the parents attend a session. And the child was pretty shy. He was withdrawn. And I'm usually pretty good at bringing kids out, but dad was intervening a lot. And he said, yeah, he's shy and he's afraid to jump in. And so I spoke directly to the child and said, well, guess what? You don't have to jump in. We could put a toe in first. How would that be? And when I got to the induction part, I started with his toe. And, he responded beautifully. So sometimes we can hijack metaphors, right? In that way. And do you ever use mixed metaphors for confusion technique?
Can you give me an example more explicitly?
Oh, if we were to take some of those idioms and mix them, for example, I had a client, this just popped in my mind, had a client who was very attached to her cat. She loved her cat more than anything else in the world, but she was really not very good at self-care. So she gave me big details about everything she did for her cat. And so I said, well, maybe you're meowing up the wrong tree. And it just caused a big pause in her. And it was almost like a pattern interrupt getting out of that, as she was projecting everything onto her care for the cat, believing that meant she was caring for herself. And so once we passed that, then I was able to redirect her to, maybe mapping out how self-care would look for her.
Okay, that's super cool. I don't do that, but I'll tell you what goes through my head when you think about that. So if I was to look at that, she puts her cat first. Because these metaphors, you can imagine what they might look like. They might not look anything like that, but you can start to imagine what they look like. So she puts the cat first. Now, in metaphor, specifically autogenic metaphor, size represents importance. So I could imagine the cat is huge relative to her. So she sees herself less important than the cat.
Yeah.
You also mentioned she's attached. So there might be a level of like attachment or binding or something like that she's maybe grown up in or whatever. So there's a whole context there. But what I love about what you did is you gave her the identity of the cat. Basically, you've mapped, because like meowing up the wrong tree, there's a confusion with the dog, but you've basically made her the cat, and the cat is what gets all the attention. So that's cool and slick, and that's really awesome. But yeah, I wouldn't do that, because the interesting thing about this, because this is a metaphor that, clients get really attached to their experience. When you suggest stuff and they really frigging fight you for it, they're like, no, that's not the case. Autogenic metaphor works in that way. So your suggestion doesn't fit with this kind of framework, because this framework is, if you say something that's out of line, it will jar the client and you won't get agreement. And it's not about jarring the client out of their situation. It's about getting them to more fully understand what their unconscious experience is so they can consciously have more choice. So I wouldn't use it, but I really love that example. That's super cool.
Okay. Okay. And in that case, it was more of a pattern interrupt was, my intention for it, because she was pretty locked on to that whole topic.
Nice.
Have you found that metaphors are more present or resonate more for some kind of people, but not for others?
So with the metaphor work I do specifically, sometimes it can take a while to get someone into thinking in metaphor or thinking in this way. So it's not necessarily as easy for some people. Some people are just in metaphors all day long. I mean, if we think of like metaphors originating in the non-dominant hemisphere, sometimes very logical, very pragmatic, like those kind of people, it can be more challenging. They can get into it, but it might just take a little, because they're so cognitive and analyzing. But what can be beneficial about these kind of approaches when you're working solely in metaphor is it gets them out of that logical frame of mind and that logical frame of reference, because it is working with the way I like to think things is, what systems or structures is the person using? So, for example, I talked about people thinking big chunk or small chunk. So, like really getting into the details. Some of you may have done hypnotic peripheral vision exercises, or where you like zoom out and you go into the universe, right? So I might use that intervention if somebody is really in the detail, because it stretches their neurology up to like the universe. If they're like, my head's in the clouds, I'm just in space, everything's floating, I might just be like, okay, well, let's just really chunk down into that. So you've got this to do, that to do. I will really narrow that perspective. So for me, it's okay, how can I stretch the frameworks that they're currently operating? Because for me, it's about creating more choice, more options for that person. And I think this is where me and you align, Kelley. It's how do we create that choice and flexibility? However, that's my bias. I know you mentioned you're not the biggest fan of scripts, me neither, because we like that flexibility. But one of the issues I've learned about myself is because I like so much choice and flexibility, I don't like making decisions. That's why my wife does it. But this is the point, right? I freaking hate what's your niche? Find your niche. I hate that, because it's about me narrowing down to that one. But I can work with so many people. But sometimes you need to make choices and decisions. So it's looking at those different polarities and how they're at play. And because every model that we use, be it Reiki, being in metaphors and movement, every modality has a certain level of filters on it. They have a certain level of language. Right? Because in order for us to understand experience, Myers-Briggs personality profiles, they're all filters in their own way. They may overlap in different ways, but they've all got inherent positives and negatives, things they naturally need to exclude or things they naturally need to include. So what I find refreshing about the sort of approach that I use, because it is eliciting information directly from the unconscious hemisphere, and we know that's the most vast space for information, I can then find so much information in that I can start to play with. And it's exciting because every metaphor I do with everybody is different in some way, shape, or form. So I get my whole variety piece, and it's always different.
So we're never bored, and I love that aspect of this kind of creative work. One class of people that I work with often is people with chronic pain. And I found that metaphorical work with them gives them a relief, but I also have to be very careful because sometimes they have had that experience be discounted. And so they need to first have it be acknowledged, their suffering acknowledged. But then from that point on, when we start to play with metaphor, and most of the things that I do, and I suspect you're the same, is providing upgrading the client's skill set so that they're not dependent on me. They're learning a structure, a tool, a technique, so that they can carry this forth. And if we're playing with metaphors for pain relief or reduction, then I want to make sure that they understand how easy it really is to, maybe they're going to be using object imagery and changing that representation of the sensation itself, or maybe they're going to be doing some kind of body parts work. I remember I've told this story about 10 years ago. I fell from a ladder and dislocated my shoulder. And a few days later, I'm sleeping on the couch and gritting my teeth because I don't like drugs and using self-hypnosis. And the phone rings, and it's Dan Cleary. I don't know if you know Dan, but he's out in Florida, and he's an icon in pain work. He's suffered some of his own from a motorcycle accident, so he had some real experiential learning. So I answer the phone. It's Dan Cleary, and he says, "Talk to your shoulder," and then he hangs up. And so my shoulder and I had this ongoing conversation that was so dramatic in how it boosted my recovery, and it reduced the pain that I was having, that I really started getting interested in the metaphors of body parts. And even Louise Hay has a whole map about how, different illnesses exist, emotionally in the body. And so, we can play with those kinds of metaphors too. But then again, I try to follow that loosely. I don't ever want to prescribe something to someone that doesn't resonate with them.
Yeah, I haven't worked with any pain specifically, but what's interesting, right? So I'm exploring all the different ways you can use this stuff. And what's interesting is you mentioned how you want your clients to not rely on you. You want them to have something that they can take away and use. So if I'm thinking there's an object that you give your client, you give them a way to think about it, talk about it, like the talk to your body part. That's just something that you give to them. So that would be like a metaphorical process. I don't like doing that. I mean, I can do. I mean, I give clients a few little things, but the clients I normally like to work with. So an example is, so if I was to draw the metaphor, there's like a person, they see like there's a pit of lava in front of them. And they're like, I can't get across to the other side. And I'm like, don't worry. They get on my back, I pick them up. I walk across the lava, I drop them off, and they toodle off.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, I like fixing things, and then the client is not involved in my life anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with something like long-term pain management, that would not work for me. Because if I have a preference to just get people from A to B, like you trust me to take you there, I'll take you there.
Yeah.
I had a guy who this was really interesting learning for me. Who he was referred by his mum. So some of those cases, like he was an older gentleman, but he was referred by his mum, and his mum was paying, and basically he wasn't taking any responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Now, normally I take full responsibility for the client because I don't trust clients. I'm like, I'll get you there. I trust myself to get you there. I'm not sure I trust you. That's how I normally operate. I get them from A to B. But because he took zero responsibility and I'm carrying this guy, he wasn't getting anywhere. So for me, that wasn't my ideal client. However, for you, because you like to carry things, normally when you're carrying something, it's like carrying a responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
You want to work with clients who are happy to take responsibility for their own pain management if you give them the right thing. So we can start to think about how we start to market ourselves. Like if that's, let's say, your ideal client for pain, do you have a painful challenge that you're carrying? Do you have something that you're looking for something to remedy?
Mm-hmm.
I can give you ways that if you're willing to take responsibility for it, can reduce your pain, can reduce your challenge. And I'll give you active things you can take with you that will make your life a lot more fulfilling with the pain you have. So we can use these things to speak to our ideal clients as well, which I find truly fascinating.
Yeah, I love that frame, and that makes total sense. And this is, all of this isn't always intentionally structured. This comes from who we are and from our own experiences too, and the way that what we've learned works through our own experiences. And often it's trial and error, as you described with that gentleman. Interesting, because one of the metaphors that I use, Dale, is I describe myself as a Sherpa. So I'm helping carry that burden as they climb the mountain. Uh, what's one of the most memorable metaphors that you've encountered from a client?
I have done so many. Cool. I'm gonna do so. I'm going to actually use myself, um, because, as I say, using this, I found it really useful for myself and stuff. And with this metaphorical frame, because it's so obtuse, you can do work on anything. So I can talk about, I don't know, my ideal client. I can talk about your specific problem if I'm working with a client. But yeah, I've realized I don't like mirrors. Um, I struggle to self-reflect. And in a lot of my challenges, I have mirrors in front of me. Like, take a good hard look at yourself. I'm very good at avoiding those. So what I just find so fascinating is, like, sometimes for those of you who know Tritaka or like those sort of eye gazing practices, just staring at yourself and just really looking at yourself for where you're at in a moment. I think when I've done metaphors and I've had like mirrors, I've actually just taken time to look at myself, work with that, and it's been really quite powerful. But I think I have a lot of different metaphors myself, and I do this on a regular basis. And it's like, yeah, painful aspects, painful things. Even if like I don't have the words for what's that thing. Somebody looked at you weird in the coffee shop, and you're like, what's going on there? There's something up. I can draw something on that. So I think I don't have a one specific metaphor because I'm very good at forgetting the
Well,
work I've done.
I love how you
But yeah,
shared that about your mirror, and thank you for that. I the reason I ask that is because often I'll even note after those things appear because I don't want to forget about them. And my clients are my best teachers. And sometimes even when I'm working with kids and they come up with solutions, which is very empowering when they come up with a solution, I'll ask them if I can use it with another kid client and I'll pay them a royalty. I'll send them $5 or something. But one adult client was a widow, and she was referred to me through a grief counselor here in my town because during the year since she'd been widowed, she gained a bunch of weight. She was turning to food for her grief. And so she wanted to lose weight, and we were having success with that. But she did tell me that she felt that there was a block, and that was her metaphor that she used. And so in hypnosis, then I had her meet that block, and she was able to surmount it in some way. And later, when she was describing it to me, it had transformed, and it was no longer a block, but it was an entry into this next stage of her life. And it was in the form of the Aurora Borealis, Dale. And
nice.
this woman's face was just so filled with light afterwards. And in the following, I only saw her maybe a couple more sessions, but when she came back, she reported how she'd gone dancing at the Elks Club and met the Italian stallion and had a great time. And this was all because the Aurora Borealis was made available to her, which previously was the block. So do you have that kind of experience where a metaphor transforms the meaning of it, changes?
So not, I mean, sometimes within the work I do, the metaphors can transform, they can transmute in some way. The way I sort of see it is when I'm so one of the reasons actually, so Andrew Austin is the guy who came up with this metaphors of movement work.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons was he's got a book, it's called something, I can't remember. It's a cool book. It's got like lots of little stories about him working with clients in it. So well worth a read. I want to say Time Machine, Rainbow Machine, the Rainbow Machine. Cool. It's quite a funky book, and he talks about real life examples of doing NLP techniques. And what he found, he was looking back when he was putting together the book on the results he'd had. Because I mean, we can all have great results with clients, but how many of them stick? how many do we follow up with? And I mean, he was training, he was doing lots of stuff, but he did the work and he found, okay, some had changed, some hadn't changed, because clients who don't get the results, like, they don't normally reach back out. Sometimes they do, but yeah. So he found this as a trend, and this is where what he found with the metaphors work is, it's like if you do a useful dream analysis or something that keeps it ticking around in your brain, keeps you thinking about that aspect of things. It's like, oh, there is a block in front of me. Like, I have just been trying to hit my head against it, and like there is a way where, like, why am I doing this? Like this sort of unconscious stays in people's heads. So even if people like it or dislike it, if they agree or disagree with it, if we're doing it correctly, it sort of helps their brains start to shift how they're thinking about the problem. I had another hypnotherapist, actually. I was coaching her on her business, and she's like, well, my business is my baby. Well, let's just think about that. If your business is a baby, it makes a lot of noise, it needs a lot, it wants a lot, it doesn't really do much. You love it, you're connected to it, but also it's going to take a long time to mature. It's going to take a long time to grow up. So just from that metaphor, and also you've got to handle it all the time, so you can't handle anything else. And it just takes up all your time. So, I mean, up to you if you want it to be your baby. Also, do you have children, Kelley?
I do.
If someone was to give you negative feedback about your child, how would you take it?
Fuck you.
Exactly. You might get a little bit protective. So just by going through this stuff, and I'm like, you can have it that way. But when I work with her later, she's like, actually, it's more of like a plant. Like, I can water it, I can feed it, but then I can go about and do my other stuff. So just through doing that, it allowed her to change her concept of how that actually was. Because I mean, I have a lot of people who get into this business. We do so much busy work. And because we think that's the right thing to do, and there's nothing necessarily like you're doing work, but okay, well, what work needs to make sense? What do you? So we can look at these things as well. So that's an interesting example of how these things can transform and change, but I don't necessarily drive that change. But if I was to look at that client and I was to communicate what happened with that client that you were mentioning, okay, so there was a block in front of you. It could be said there was no way through it, there was no way around it. You were trying to push through it, but you couldn't. But you decided, actually, I can overcome this. Mm-hmm. And as you get over that thing, as you overcome that, as that barrier is no longer in front of you, it's actually behind you. You've surmounted this. Yeah. It actually looks a lot more colorful. Even in dark times, you can see how vibrant this thing is when you just look up.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So true. And
I love
looking
it.
up
And
is like optimism.
You are really enhancing my usage of metaphors with clients now. And it also, I see the need to have the continuity of it through the whole session, even through all the work. And I consciously do that, which makes sense to me because I think it's probably true that metaphors work better as part of a conceptual structure, right? Than just independently, or does it matter?
I don't know. They might do, they might not do. I mean, you can work just with metaphors and you can create change. I mean, you can have a chat with someone in a bar, they give you a metaphor, they tell you a story, your mind's blown. We watch things on like YouTube, TED Talk. So metaphors can just be used by themselves to create change. I think it comes down from your intentionality. Do you know what you're? I did a 3.5 hour presentation a little while ago called "Dancing with Dichotomies," and a little bit like I've talked about, like personality, like people who are more feeling as opposed to more logical. How do you tell stories about? So I was working with a client who was really logical. They did A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then they realized something, and they just stopped, and they're like, "Well, actually, if I'm to just focus my attention on how my body is and what's going into my body," they started to notice things. So how do you pace people from one side to the other? So you could do that, but my intention is, where are you coming from? I want to get someone who's stuck in this way, telling a story about somebody who did these things in order to get here. And then you can layer that with a hypnotic induction where you further anchor that thing, but you've set up the framework neurologically for them to go from A to B. So it really depends, pardon me, I think, on intentionality. I mean, you can use stories to evoke emotions. Like those who've seen Tony Robbins when he gets really emotional. I mean, is he? Yeah, I'm slightly resigned and cynical, but that's me. But if we embody these emotions ourselves and we pace somebody's experience enough, I mean, I could tell the story. Actually, I'll tell the story. Let's see if I tear up. So I was talking to my wife about this stuff because I'm so passionate about this work, as you can probably get. And I was sitting on the sofa downstairs, or the blue chairs. We got two blue chairs, and she's like, "But Dale, I mean, we talked about different ways of making, but why do you do this?" And I just sat there, and I'm just like, "It's so important. Like, it just is. Like, I was so freaking clueless about my life, and I just didn't know what to do. And like, this thing has opened up so many possibilities of how I can see the world in a whole new different way. That's why I need to teach people this stuff. Like, that's why it takes effort, but I want people to be freaking good at it. Because it's super cool. But like the whole story about vulnerability, you can pace people into emotions. I need to practice that story. Clearly, I didn't try enough. But this is what we can do. If we allow ourselves to associate, we can set that frame up. If clients suffering with shame, I tell a shame story.
Yeah.
Because then the client can tell it. It's that kind of stuff.
Hypnotists go there first.
Exactly.
I told you before we started this talk that I'm working on my next book is on grief and loss, and I've had a lot of grief and loss in the last 5 years in my own personal life. And last fall, we had a lot of windstorms, and I have on my property some wild cherry trees that they're just about at the end of their life. And so they were starting to topple onto our access road. And so my neighbors came over and cleared them for me. And I love trees. So I had some anticipatory feelings about losing those trees. And but I thought, okay, it's necessary. They're old. They're dying, and they can even cause more harm. But when I went up to get the mail and I was faced with the devastation, I lost it. I went back into the house and cried for an hour. I wasn't prepared for that. And I share this story with my clients who are grieving. And I use the metaphor of the forest of grief, that we're wandering together through it. And it makes it safe for them to touch that grief, to open that door to it, rather than if I were just to say, well, how does it feel that your mother died? Right? So we can go there first, and we can open that door with our own metaphorical experiences. And I think that, it can make us vulnerable. And the key is not to be grabbing all that attention, right? And to be using it therapeutically.
And the other thing, that's really nice, and I love that metaphor. And we can even look at different, like trees can be quite symbolically archetypal of family, especially in Eastern culture as well. And like you've got like well rooted, the family root stuff like that. But even they were cherry trees. The amount of the ecosystem, the amount of the community that nourished, the amount of things that it allowed to grow, all of those different layers as well.
Is there a difference? Because I do a lot of conversational hypnosis, and I suspect you do too. So is there a difference in how we would use these approaches conversationally rather than a more formal hypnotic experience?
Yeah, 100%. So the work of metaphors and movement takes place specifically out of specifically in conscious awareness. So there's no specific hypnotic process to it.
Okay.
But the way I look at it is any unconscious information that you wish to communicate, you can do using this languaging with these idioms. And that helps to give further insight. I was talking to my wife actually today because she's currently going through an interesting situation with a service provider that she's been working with. And it's interesting because basically she wants to get some money back because she felt she's not getting what she wants, etc., etc. And we were listening back to some of the early voice messages that this individual was sending, and the person was actually communicating the style of relationship that they wanted. So we can use just conversationally what metaphors come up, how can we communicate, what further insight can we extrapolate for those things? I feel boxed in, I feel trapped. Well, they can't do the right thing, they can't do the left thing, they can't progress, they can't go back. There's no way out of this. And you learn what boxes and structures are like. So, yeah, thinking about growing up and growing out of these things, we have the thing of, for those normally people who are hypnotherapists, they did have another job before that. And the challenge from going to an employee to being self-employed is quite a journey. So you've got to grow up and grow out of a lot of old behaviors and a lot of old ways of doing stuff. The idea of expecting a paycheck is an interesting thing. You have freedom, but how free is freedom?
Yes.
It's an interesting
yes,
one.
it's true. And I think about, how you're talking about the journey. And of course, we're all on a journey. And so all the metaphors that are rife within that journey, right? And not just the paths, but the directions, the vehicles. One of my favorite metaphors for the body is the vehicle of our life. And Melissa Roth once wrote in some of her training about we're going down the road of life and we hit a pothole and things get thrown out of alignment. I think this was in the context of an autoimmune training that she was doing. And so that really resonated. And that's something that I've often communicated to people. And then there are all kinds of vehicle metaphors. I know Cal Banyan has one for emotional eating where your inner senses are like the signals on your dashboard and they're giving you information. And if you're not responding to it properly, then you're not addressing whatever that instrument is giving you. So when we're thinking about helping people progress, and whether they're going forward or sideways or up or down, kind of depends on their perception, on their journey, it's apparent that using these metaphors is so helpful.
I agree. And I think what's interesting so life is a journey is a big archetypical metaphor that exists. And obviously we have different vehicles. So what vehicle you choose makes a difference. But if you're tuning in, if you're looking at let's say your unconscious signals or whatever are giving you, that implies it's a mechanical problem, depending on what it is. So when metaphors, I think, can be really powerful is when the metaphor you use directly maps the person's metaphor of their experience. Because if you can, so let's just imagine someone's like, oh yeah, I want to get healthy. I feel something's broken. I feel like something's not working. It's just it just feels like it's misfiring, It's just not running smoothly. That implies a car metaphor. So if you're to tell a car metaphor story for how you work with people, you're a lot more likely to get success with that person in my frame of things because it maps how they see their problem. My business is just not growing enough. It's just not growing fast enough. These things, okay, well, I can help your business grow. Everyone likes an evergreen system, right? But organic businesses take time to grow.
Wow. Love it.
So if you want results now, well, I want to grow an oak tree. I mean, that stuff takes years. So So
we're really talking about utilization and being able to discern that through the metaphors that they're using and then matching it, right? And this is probably why I don't like a lot of the scripted inductions or the imagery about safe or happy places, those kinds of things. And instead, I will get that information from a client before we even begin doing any kind of formal work so that I can make sure that I'm utilizing what they've told me and any metaphors that they use. And it seems that things just flow so much easier because I didn't do that when I was first trained. You know, we're given that box to operate in originally, and it took me probably a couple of years to figure out that I didn't have to go by those constrictions. And then I really started enjoying what I was doing, and my confidence really shot up, because without those kinds of restrictions, I could join my client in their own cognitive flow. And that meant pretty much it was unlimited, the kind of language that we could use, the kind of imagery that we could use.
I fully agree 100%. But as a slight caveat, as a consideration, so I mean, I would just say you're going to go on a journey, we're going to go somewhere, and I'd work with whatever came up. But if, let's just say, you do like writing scripts, I mean, you might not be listening, but let's just say you do like writing scripts. Consideration, when would you take someone into a safe space? So let's say you're doing inner child work, because if a child is in a room, it's in a safer space.
Mm-hmm.
If you're to take someone on a journey through a wood down a path, it's a natural place to be. There is some direction. If someone lacks direction, take them on a path because they start on a direction. Why do you take someone on a beach? Because a beach is somewhere that you can be sure of. I mean, people say it's multi-representational, which it is, but it's a place you can be sure of because it's a shore. It's predictable because it's got the ingoings and outgoings, but it's also always different because the tile is never quite the same. So if you're thinking Tony Robbins' 6 human needs, there's certain maps. So we can start to consider what environment, if I wanted to be a bit more leading, what environment, because let's just say you're teaching a class, right? You could leave it crazy open, but if you want to guide people, you could think, where would it be useful to take this person? And we can think about what are the archetypical presuppositions built into those aspects.
Right. If we're up on a scenic mountain view, we're going to get perspective, right? We're going to maybe be able to have that distance that we need.
Which could be good. However, the person's going to be disappointed because they're like, it's all the way down there, depending on how far away it is. Right. So there are pros and cons. If someone wants to get perspective, that's cool. On a path in a wood, they might not know where it's going. Right. If it's in a field, it's pretty open, but it's also quite vulnerable. Okay. So
great.
Pros and cons.
This is very helpful. Thank you. So, you know, we use a lot of parts work, ego state work. And one of the things that I've noticed in conversations with my colleagues is many of them take that very literally. And when they're trying to do some parts work, they can't get the part to communicate, or they can't get the part to do this or that. And it stalls them. And for me, parts are metaphors. It's all metaphorical work. And so do you do that kind of work? How does your metaphors of movement play into that?
So if I was to do just metaphors of movement with somebody, and so for me, the way I do sessions is I normally do 3 or 4 different metaphors and we walk through them. But if there's something obvious, like I work with a woman, I did one metaphor, but she had some sort of anxiety about something, but it was pretty trivial. So I just fixed the anxiety. Like, metaphor wasn't necessarily needed, but I do that stuff. So I'm like, let's do that. Always do what you know might not work, and then you do what you definitely know works, depending on your time frame. That way you can experiment. Well, that's at least how I see it.
Okay. So, I love experiments.
Exactly. So, but then if it's obvious it's past work, I might do a metaphor to see what comes up, or I'll just do like a parts conversation. And that's how I would normally do it. It's ultimately, if we think about parts work, if we think about, I don't know, idiomotor signals, all of these different aspects, it's, well, what am, like, intentionality, what am I trying to achieve? I'm looking to see if these parts can align, possibly if they can come together, possibly if they can be harmonized. But that might not be useful. There might be, so it's okay. Is there another part, like what's making that not work? So and this is why parts work can be so powerful, because if we see it as a metaphor, we're working metaphorically, and that's coming up in their conversation. There's just two parts to me. One of them says this, one part says that. Okay, that's like screaming parts work intervention. So yeah, I would say I would do parts work if I thought it was needed. But when I do the metaphors work, I essentially elicit what's in all directions. So I elicit the metaphorical landscape.
Okay.
And I mean, I wouldn't normally do this, but I could get someone to communicate with an aspect of that internal environment because it's all a projection of what's going on inside anyway.
Right. And it probably makes it an even richer experience for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is wonderful. This has been, I've learned so much from you, and been a fascinating conversation. Does anybody have any questions for Dale? Yeah, go ahead, Coach B.
Actually, when Dale was talking about mirrors, I realized that 5 minutes before the class, I came across a mirror, and I said to myself, "Oh my God, my hair looks like a dead plant. For the past 15 days, no matter what I do, my hair looks like a dead plant." And then 2 minutes later, in my head, it was, "I feel like a dead plant." So where do I go from here?
Okay, cool. So just looking at you, Coach B, you don't look like an actual dead plant.
No,
Would you say that's the case? Okay. So where is the dead plant relative to you? If you were to put it in a location, where is the dead plant?
it's
Left, right, front, back?
inside my heart, I think.
So the dead plant's inside your heart. Okay. Do you mind if we go through? I mean, hopefully we'll get this done in 10 minutes. Do you mind doing a session? Does that work, Kelley?
Oh yeah, we're fine. Take
Okay,
as long
cool.
as you need.
So there's a dead plant in your heart. Lovely. Cool. What's to your left?
It's all emptiness around me.
So there's emptiness to your left. Okay.
Yeah,
What's to your right?
empty, all empty and dull and gray.
Okay. So I know you're saying that about everywhere, but it might be slightly different. So it's dull and grey to the right, or is it dull and grey?
All around, it's dull and gray, and I can see myself as a shadow with the dead plant inside.
So you can see yourself. So where are you relative to yourself if you can see yourself?
I'm looking at myself.
Okay, so you're looking at yourself with a dead plant in your thing. Okay. So you're in the middle. You're looking. So that is that dead plant in front of you. That you with a dead plant in front of you. Okay. What's to your left? Not the dead plant thing. What's to your left?
It's my environment here at my clinic. So it's the room.
Okay. So there's a room. So to your left is what?
A rocking chair,
Okay. What's to your right?
a recliner.
What are you standing on?
I'm sitting on my chair.
That's what you're
So
doing
it's
in
me,
your
it's
office.
the actual me, yeah.
So if I'm to look at it, you're standing there and you're looking at a version of yourself that has a dead plant in the
Yes.
middle. Okay, cool. So when you're here looking at that version of your dead plant, what's to your left?
I cannot see anything, as if it's an
Okay.
emptiness as well.
Let's do this a bit different. Okay, so this is natural. She's mixing reality and she's mixing metaphor. So I'm looking to keep her in the frame. So if you were to look at that version of yourself that's in front of you, that's got that dead plant like in the heart, if you were to move further to the left from that, what's there?
An empty room.
An empty room. So there's an empty room to your left. What's to your right?
The rest of the empty room. It's total emptiness everywhere.
Okay, so you're in an empty room. And what are you standing on?
The floor.
And what's up?
Okay. The minute you asked me, in my head, it was moving sands, but I don't know why I said the floor.
So you're standing on moving sands. Okay. Are you sinking into it?
No,
Or is it
not yet.
okay? Not yet. Things to look forward to. So there's moving sands, and what's up?
There is a ceiling that's very low, so it's not like I can see the horizon.
Okay. So you're standing there. There's a version of you in front of you with a dead plant in where your heart is. To your left is a wall, to your right is a wall, behind you is a wall, in front of you is a wall, there's a ceiling up, and you're standing on this sand. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. In real life, Coach B, in real life, what do you do in this situation? How do you try and fix this whole thing? What do you do in real life?
In real life, I would do my best not to sink down
Oh no, that's what you
because
would do in the metaphor. In real life, what do you actually do regarding this problem?
I don't know.
So do you do nothing? Do you procrastinate? Do you juggle? What do you actually do in real life when it comes to this problem?
I move forward.
Do you
I,
actually move
I, I
forward?
keep I keep on moving. Yeah,
So you just keep doing stuff.
yeah.
Keep moving.
Because in my head, if I stop, I will sink. So as long
Gotcha.
as
No,
I'm
no. So
moving,
that's what
I'm
you
fine.
do. That's what you do in the metaphor. But in real
No, no,
life, you just
even
keep
in real life.
moving.
Yes,
Okay, cool. Okay. So in this situation, you can't do what's right. There is no way right. There's no right thing for you to do. You can't move in the right direction. Similarly, you can't explore what's left. What's left for you is blocked. There's no way left. There's no way back in this. It could be said that you're boxed in. There's
I
no
am.
way out. And there is a ceiling to this, and that's over your head.
Mm.
But you look forward to a version of yourself that isn't quite human, because most humans don't have a plant in their heart.
Yeah,
But what you look forward to looks emotionally dead. Doesn't
exactly,
look like it's emotionally growing.
exactly.
But what you look forward to isn't actually you.
So now when you said it, I think it's the old me, but it's in front of me.
Oh, so you look forward to the old version of you.
No, this is all what I see in front of me. I don't look
Yeah.
forward to her.
Well, I mean, you do because it's ahead of you. Like that's the only
Yeah,
thing around you. Now, some people turn their back on these things, but not you. It's at the forefront. It's what you focus on. It's what's ahead of you. And the only thing you see of that old version of you is that it was quite dead emotionally, it could be said.
yeah.
So let's just imagine for a moment, Coach B, you and I, we're walking down a strange road and we see this woman. Now, she's standing in this room, right? She's got this sort of dead version of herself or version with like a plant there, walls all around, standing on sand. Don't worry, we know how to fix this. We've seen this before. Just keep moving. Just keep moving. Is that good advice?
I don't think she can see there is any other option.
But is it good? I know there's no other option, but is it good advice? Just keep moving. Is that good advice to this person? You see
No,
her.
because she will bump right into the dead plant if she keeps
Any
moving.
better advice? Any better advice? Mm.
This is why
Well,
I'm
this.
stuck.
Well, as much as you mentioned this is about your hair, this is a pretty familiar problem.
Hmm.
Probably say a lifelong problem.
It is.
I know. Because she's in what's called a container. And container metaphors are lifelong problems or issues. Essentially, they represent the family, the
Hmm.
situation that we were born into. So when I look at this, like this is a little girl who had no room to expand. She could never do the right thing, never do what's left. And the only thing she had to look forward to was the old version of herself that wasn't quite real, wasn't alive. But there is something we can do about it, but you might not like it. So I'm going to apologize in advance, Coach B, but what I'd like you to do, just close your eyes. So standing there in that room, wall to the right, wall to the left, wall behind, that old version of you with that dead plant inside, this isn't your fault. You didn't choose this. But you can still do something about it. So what I'd like you to do, Coach B, is standing there. I'd like you to just grow up. And I mean that literally. Grow up, 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 up. Start growing, keep growing, and tell me what you notice.
I'm much bigger than the character with the dead plant inside. So I can
Keep.
cross over her
And what happens?
and I can move forward.
And how does that change things?
I'm not stuck anymore.
Oh, feel free to open your eyes.
I love this.
Now, so we know this is a lifelong problem, right?
Mm.
That Coach B has had. And this is something, as much as she said it's about the hair, there's other aspects to this. Now, one of the problems with this is she's now in the outside world, like people who have left the corporate world and now have to build their own business. They're now responsible for taking steps, choosing where they're going to go and how they're going to get there. That's a whole different problem. Here, she had no choice in what she could do. She could only take so many steps, but that thing was still in the room with her. She could not go anywhere. So now, as much as she's out of this, she has a different set of problems. So good luck.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was wonderful. That was amazing to witness.
Thank you. It's good fun.
Yeah. Anyone else have any questions for Dale? Dale, what kind of how does somebody get in touch with you, and how do they train with you? Can you give some details?
Beautiful. So yeah, if you go on to metaphors of movement.us, you'll find my fabulous webpage. There's a few different things there. There's options to do my training, level 1 and 2 training. I think the next course is coming up. Let's check my calendar. I want to say June. No, March. If you use the code I love metaphors, all capitals, I love metaphors, all capitals, you get a 10% discount because I'm kind of like that. But there is also, if you're like, oh, B's thing was interesting, I'd like to get a little bit of that myself. I'd like to explore something. At the bottom of that main page, there's get a 30-minute demo. Because like what you've just seen is a bit freaking weird, right? It's very difficult for me to sell, present, put out there. And this is why I go to a lot of different conferences and I'm basically doing demonstrations all the time because I want to get this work out there and I want to demonstrate the work. So if you'd like to work or explore something, you can book a free session on there, 30 minutes, as I say, to explore it yourself. Or there's the link to join the train. I think there's also like a free introduction to metaphors of movement called Leveraging Metaphors of Movement for a Change, which you can sign up. I think that's like a 30-minute free training as well. So have a little look on there. And yeah, you can always connect to me on Facebook or explore YouTube or we could be friends.
Yes, we're friends now. Now you're in our you're officially
Friends.
a hypnotic man, and you've got the hypnotic women accessing you. So it'll be fun to see what comes of that. Thank you
Indeed.
so much, Dale. I've really enjoyed this, getting to know you, and I've learned a lot. And my head's going to be processing this for some time. My body too, I suspect, and my clients will benefit. So I'm looking forward to learning more about metaphors of movement too. So you'll hear.
Dale, I was just checking your website. How come level 2 is before level 1? Level 2 is in March, level 1 is in June.
Cool. In that they're both in March. But one's in a minute. I'll check the dates. Thank you for
Yes,
correcting.
please, because I'm going to
check the
enroll, so I just need to know the dates.
Cool. The dates will be fun. I'll fix that now. You see, detail, not my forte. Detail, not my forte. That's why I need people like you, Coach B, to say, Dale, this is wrong, and I'll get that fixed.
It's all good. We're all in this together.
I'll actually tell a lie. They're all in June. Level 1 and 2, both in June. I tell a lie. Past March. So June. Okay.
There you go. And tomorrow is March. All right. Well, thank you, ladies, for joining us here today. And thank you, Dale. I really enjoyed it. It was great.
Thank you, Kelley, and thank you, Dale.
Yeah. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend.
Thank you.